So my name is Colleen Keahy, and I'm the founder of the Tennessee Hemp Industries Association. And in 2013, I observed Kentucky pass Senate Bill 50, which provided them the opportunity to start growing industrial hemp in the state north to us. And by virtue of having worked in a nonprofit trade association covering the state, I learned a few things about advocacy and how to connect the dots in terms of a logistics chain for developing industry. And so I wanted to take that little bit of experience I had and apply that to bringing hemp to the state of Tennessee. So I was able to work with our state legislators in developing the bill that we passed in 2014. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you the legal framework that we have in the state. I'm also going to share with you a little bit about what the federal law is compared to ours, and I'm going to share with you a look at the farms and the two seasons, the season of 2015 and this season, in terms of what we've been able to do as an association or a farming network, and just give you the opportunity to yield to the information that you're provided and decide whether or not if hemp is something you'd be interested in getting involved in. And so yeah, that's what we're going to do for the next hour. This picture here actually is a farm in Chapel Hill, Tennessee. The license is under Sanders Scales, but it was cultivated by Clint Palmer and Paige Thompson. And there's been a very difficult, there's just been a difficult landscape in terms of finding a buyer for the crop. We are not really yet able to compete with the Canadian market, which is quite large, and we'll get to that. But an idea that we have been kind of sitting on for a couple of years was the idea of developing a crop maze in a hemp field, because it's very tall and it's very sturdy and stable, a little bit like a bamboo, and so we would be able to carve out a maze and turn it into an agritourism opportunity, which is what we did. So this weekend actually is the very last weekend that this crop maze will be available for the public to experience. And I'll share more about the crop maze towards the end of the presentation. But just to let you know, there is a farm in Middle Tennessee that you'll be able to go to this weekend and roam through the field and probably get lost, but you'll have some fun, I'm sure. And this weekend, there will also be vendors there. There will be hemp companies who are creating domestic hemp products, which is something that would be great to see if you're interested in going that direction. Again, the founder of the Tennessee Hemp Industries Association, we established in late 2013. We're comprised of supporting business and farming members. And we began holding monthly meetings in 2015 at MTSU. We still hold monthly meetings at MTSU. And our September meeting is actually tomorrow night from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. So if you're interested in joining us at MTSU for probably a more thorough approach to what's happening right now, I welcome you to join us. And you can find more information about how to attend our events in terms of parking and what buildings, that kind of thing. The website is tnhia.org. And this is basically what our meetings look like. This is the classroom we have. This is the group of people that come together monthly to discuss issues, challenges. Yeah.
What room are y'all in? What building?
We are in the new science building. It's actually the Tennessee Center for Botanical Plant Research, I believe is the correct name.
Is it pretty close to where the cafeteria is?
It is. It's. Are you referring to the Keithley building?
Yes. You have the library and stuff over there as well.
Actually, the building is to the. Okay, if you're coming in from the back, where the faculty parking is, it's the building directly to the left of the library from the back.
Okay.
It has a glass greenhouse off the side. That's kind of a good indicator you're at the right place. I believe our classroom is 1095, Again, please visit the website
Right.
just to be sure about the
NIA,
process.
did you say www.nia?
TN, Tennessee, so
Tennessee.
TNHIA. Oh, yeah,
Oh,
right
there it is, there it is.
Yeah, sorry, thank you.
No, it's all
Thank you
right.
for that. Yeah, so.
.org. Yeah.
Yeah, done. Right, yeah. So this is our group, and these aren't only farmers, these are also people who provide products or services to the industry. We have people who sell nutrients or provide lighting for those who are experimenting with indoor operations, those types of things. And just general, this is actually open to the public. We are a member organization. If you're coming as a non-member, we ask for a $10 fee, but if you're a member, it's free. So if you're seriously considering this, I say become a member, and then you can come all the time.
How much is membership?
Farming membership is $75 for the year. Supporting is $50, and then business is $125 or $150. We have more farming members than we do anything. All right, so I'm going to review with you how this even came to be in terms of states becoming hemp states, pretty much with the opportunity to actually cultivate. Because for a long time, there were around a dozen states who had passed some type of resolution about wanting hemp to be a commodity, but they weren't actually able to grow it because it would have been in conflict with federal law. So now that the Legitimacy of Industrial Hemp Research Act passed in the Farm Bill in 2014, states are able to create laws that allow them to be in accordance with this act and begin cultivating. And so again, you would find this 2014, the Farm Bill. The section that focuses on hemp is section 7606. What it does is it defines hemp as a cannabis plant containing no more than 0.3% or less THC by dry weight basis. That is pretty much the standard definition for what the government and state laws generally are saying is hemp versus marijuana, because of course people think that they're one and the same. They do come from the same species. Genetically, there are differences that can be noted in lots of different ways. Phenotypes, a ratio of cannabinoids, but the one that we focus on because of its notorious or illicit nature is THC. The government is always focused on THC being the problematic cannabinoid, if you will, because of the...
And how do you make a plant change its THC? I mean,
It's not the same plant.
Right, it's different.
It's a different plant.
Right.
Totally a different plant. Okay.
Right. It has a different genetic profile, if you will.
Okay.
But they both come from the same
They look
species.
the same though, right? Yeah.
They do in a lot of
Yeah.
ways, and then they look different in a lot of ways.
Okay.
So, and we'll cover that.
All right.
When did the laws come into effect that outlawed the growing of hemp? In the early days of this country, it was widely grown.
That's right, yeah. In fact, it was a commodity that we relied on. Yeah, exactly right. In 1937, the Marijuana Tax Act was passed. That came after a slew of, I guess, yellow journalism, if you will, from the William Randolph Hearst days when they were associating it with Mexicans and trying to pin it on it's a bad drug. It causes
Also, too, they started using nylon and stuff.
Right, exactly. And so then the other factor to this was the gentleman who was creating yellow journalism also owned the tree and pulp paper companies, and was really wanting to get people off of hemp and get them onto these other things, because people were also creating paper with hemp and doing all kinds of different things.
Was there some kind of crazy movie or
Yes,
that would
that
make you go
yeah,
crazy?
Reefer Madness, right? Yeah.
Oh, that's what it was, yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Reefer
Yeah,
Madness,
yeah.
That's
So
it.
that's really the history. I mean, it really comes down to special interests racial discrimination, using this as a way to demonize this so that you could, really support, the plastics industry that was erupting, industrialized, the synthetics industry. Yeah, so we went far away from what was natural in favor of something that was synthetic. So then in 2015, House Resolution 4660 to the Commerce, Justice, and Science Appropriations Act did something a little more for us, because whereas the Farm Bill defined hemp and would allow institutions of higher education or state departments of agriculture to begin hemp cultivation for research and state pilot programs, the Department of Justice wasn't very excited about this. As you can imagine, the thought train was for those who were advocating for the Department of Justice side of this was that hemp is marijuana, and it's conflated. It is the same thing in their minds, and so they started to put some pressure down on the states. And the first instance we saw of this was actually in Kentucky, when they were importing their seed in 2014 for their inaugural season for doing the crop pilot program. And the DEA held up the seed they had imported at customs, and they weren't going to release it to the state of Kentucky, and it required that the agricultural commissioner of the state of Kentucky going to bat against the federal government's Department of Justice and the Drug Enforcement Administration to get the seed back. So as you can tell, the controversy around this has been very difficult for us to maneuver as a developing industry, because the constant pushback from the federal government's agencies or administrations has been that hemp is marijuana, regardless of there being a definition that is in the Farm Bill specific to hemp and widely known internationally. Hemp has been legal in Europe and Canada and other countries for a very, very long time. Hemp is something new to us, it seems, because we've been complacent to separate it from marijuana up until this point in history.
Did you not have the same thing happen to you all this last season?
No, we did not. And a similar thing did happen in Tennessee. We'll cover that last year, but it's pretty much these relationships with the DEA have been established, and the momentum is gaining. More states are becoming legal, and the DEA can no longer really fiddle with their thumbs and try to ignore the fact that this is happening. And so we're glad for that. But what the 2015 House Resolution 4660 did was allow to basically use the Appropriations Act in a way to prohibit the DEA from using any of their funds to interfere with states who are creating laws to legalize hemp, and also to prohibit the Department of Justice and DEA from contravening in states that are acting in accordance with the Farm Bill. So, in other words, the Appropriations Act said there's no money for the Department of Justice or the DEA to counteract what's being done. So that was a great step for us, because we needed them not to have the resources in order to
Well, also
do that.
too, they don't fund, they don't get paid for the type of action they do, correct?
Right, and they can't use any of the money to do so, which means, any action they do, if they turn the engine on a car to come after someone, that's using federal money and resources, and the government said, no, you don't have this available. So that was a very important step for us in 2015, federally. Now back to the state law. So, Senator Frank Nicely and Representative Jeremy Faison in 2013 started really discussing, okay, how are we going to legalize hemp in the state of Tennessee? I was very privileged to be able to be part of those conversations, and we were able to work a law that allowed us to create a agricultural pilot program in the state of Tennessee. What we did effectively was define hemp as distinct from marijuana in our own state law. So now we are recognized hemp is distinct. It is also less than 0.3% THC variety. And it recognizes hemp as a state agricultural commodity. That's very important. So we recognize that hemp is agriculture. It's like corn, it's like soybean, it's like any of these other things. It requires the Department of Agriculture to promulgate rules and regulations and oversee agricultural pilot programs. A lot of traditional farmers don't like that because there's no other agricultural commodity that the Department of Ag has rules and regs over in the nature of this program. The reason for this is not to take away your state liberties. It's really more about protecting the licensed grower to make sure, hey, if everybody's crossing their T's and dotting their I's in terms of what is federally permissible, then we have your back, like making sure that this is something that the department can license you with and feel comfortable and confident that there's not going to be a problem between Tennessee hemp farmers and the Department of Justice or the DEA or what have you. And then, so in 2015, that was our inaugural planting season. There were no amendments offered, and we didn't go back to the books to do anything with the law. We did this year. So in 2016, we have new laws that we introduced, and after I explain to you what happened last season, I'll tell you about what we did to change the law this year. And so we'll see that later in the presentation. All right, so we're going to focus now on the 2015 season. And last year, we had 54 approved applicants who originally applied for 2,100 acres of industrial hemp crops. I mean, that's the land that they had intended to plant, but that's not what we ended up with. 47 became licensed, and we grew, or actually, okay, so 47 became licensed, and the 1,400 acres is what actually was planted. And then there were 1,000 acres inspected as of August 19th. That's something that we have in the law, is that periodically the Department of Agriculture will come and test to make sure that the THC level is where it needs to be. We're pretty confident about what it will be because we're only growing certified hemp varieties in the state, and they have documentation for a long time now, several decades, that can pretty much tell you from a variety data sheet standpoint where that falls in terms of THC. And it's usually much lower than 0.3% that the definition has as a threshold. It's usually much, much lower than that. So we're very confident about that. In fact, the highest THC test was 0.1%, and that variety was Finola. And that variety tested at that percentage, which was the highest at the time in Middle Tennessee. Environmental factors can cause a THC value to go up, and it is pretty well known that if you have marijuana and hemp planted somewhere near each other, that they will compete with each other in terms of pollinating and causing the THC of marijuana value to go down, and also alternatively could cause the THC value in hemp to go up. So if you are aware that marijuana may be growing anywhere near your crop, that would be a potential area of concern, although nothing to get incredibly hysterical about. As a result of the season, because there were crop failures due to late planting, early flowering, weeds basically championing over the hemp, and I think that we might have had some rain issues that might have caused crop failures as well. We ended up with only 698 acres that were actually harvested or accounted for by the end of the season out of the 1,400 that were actually planted.
So 50% of the growers lost money.
Right. Yeah. They lost the crop.
How much does it cost per acre to put it in?
It depends on the variety.
Corn will usually run around $150 to $200 an acre.
I would say in terms of just, if we were just talking seed, and we were looking at maybe sowing at 50, I would say 50 pounds to an acre. It might be more, like 80 or 100. You're probably looking at $8 to $10 a pound. So, it's a little more,
Well, you know, corn seeds are expensive too now.
yeah. All right, so this was the original projection map in terms of what was grown last year. So this was done in May 2015, just based on the paperwork alone. This wasn't based on actual crops in the ground. And this is, I'm sure this is very small for you. And I want to let you know if you want to email me at, and my email will be at the end. I'll be happy to send you this presentation. I think it'll also be on the website for the market here. So as you can see, I mean, we had a lot of interest in people who were getting involved in all 3 divisions of the state, which was really fantastic and somewhat unexpected, to be quite honest, because we've been very quiet about that hemp is illegal here. It's only been in the news a number of times, and we haven't been too over the top about it. So this was the original projection, so just keep in your mind what this looks like. When you see all these little black dots, you're looking at anywhere from a third of a tenth to 4 acres, and there were 54 farms that grew up to 4 acres. You've got X's where it's 5 to almost 10 acres. There were 17 of those farms. The little orange squares, I'm sure, are very difficult to see. There were 29 of those, and that was 10 to 50 acres. And then the green circles that are filled in were 129 to 197 acres, one landmass. And there were 4 that grew that much. And I'm not sure how many of the larger farms actually even made it.
You say they're in West Tennessee, would they have pretty good soil?
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, it looks like in Rutherford County, we just had a couple of 3 little places up there.
Yeah, so that would have been MTSU. There's a Valentine Farm, and I'm not sure who the other one would have been.
Now, is the Eagleville maize, is that in Rutherford County or is that Bedford County?
It's in Chapel Hill. So I feel, I'm not sure. I think it's in Williamson. I think, well, yeah.
Down the border.
Right.
Chapel Hill's down over west of us.
Right.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
Southwest of us.
Yeah.
That'd probably be Marshall County.
Okay. And yeah, it could be, because I'm seeing this one right here, and I'm thinking, oh, that kind of looks like where it's at. So this is the Canada variety, and this is when they had just sown the seed, and this was a project done by a cooperative that came together last year. There was a gentleman from Canada who came down here, and he helped develop a cooperative known as the Tennessee Hemp Farm. And originally, I think they started out as 17 farmers and then ended up being around maybe only a dozen or less. And they came together to help manage the growth of this. Canada has been growing hemp since 1998. And we've been importing $500 million worth of it. So the Canadians have got this. And so we were actually pretty excited to have the gentleman come down and create this cooperative.
What's it sold for?
Well, there's a lot of different things, and we'll get to it. So this was June 17, and again, we received our seed late. The Canada variety seemed to do pretty well because this is him, this is Dwayne from Canada. And by July 22nd, this was what grew of the small little sprouts that you just saw. And this was a very fantastic example crop because it was able to suppress the weeds and was an actual success. And I believe that this crop was harvested for chaff material. and I'm not really sure about what they did with it after that. Here's that same crop harvested in September. So they basically hung it up and dried it, and then they removed the leaf material, and which is what the chaff is, and they may have used it for paper, or they could have also maybe soaked it in alcohol to remove some of the terpenes from it for various different things. Cannabis as essential oils, very popular right now. Also, the cannabinoids, which are being used for therapeutic tinctures, that can also result from the plant. Here are some of the issues that prevented a lot of farmers from being able to move forward. Pigweed gained advantage over the hemp. These photos are from a farmer named John Henry out of far west Tennessee, and he put in a lot of work, and he had hired people to really help him cultivate pretty significant land mass for his hemp crop, and it ended up being a complete failure due to the fact that the pigweed championed the hemp. This is another issue. We've got some nice looking hemp plants here, and this is Clint Palmer, who was a student at the time at MTSU. He's now graduated, and now he's working on his master's and PhD at MTSU, focusing on hemp. But this here is a crop that he planted in terms of trying to create row crop with perfect density and get that going. And Johnson grass completely dwarfed the hemp. It got so far up, I mean, you'd have to get in there and look down to even find the hemp if it survived at all, due to the fact that it was now in the shade. So in a perfect world, this over here would have been like the first slide I showed you that is now hemp maize, but that is actually all Johnson grass. Here is the resulting map in terms of the season, and this is also showing you the different varieties of hemp that were grown. And so one of the things that we're facing in the state of Tennessee is that we have a contingency on what kind of hemp seeds that we can cultivate in the state, and they have to be certified varieties. And by that, we're looking at seeds that are probably from other countries who have gone through the intellectual property documentation and now have plant variety protection laws around them. But the reason we are focused on these is because this helps us maneuver that paranoia between the federal government and what we are doing, because these varieties are standardized and they're predictable because they are certified. And so there should be no question whether we are growing hemp or whether we are growing marijuana when we are growing certified varieties of hemp. And that is why we have that basically written in the law at this point in time. Here's actually what resulted. And actually I misquoted on the earlier slide, so only 659 acres is what resulted, not 698. So we were even less than 50%. So this was basically the final report in terms of hemp cultivation in the state. The Department of Agriculture had a seed pressing demo day. They had a seed press that was purchased actually by a company that thought they might get involved in processing hemp. That is one of the areas that we need to close the gap on, is finding processors, manufacturers, and distributors for our domestic hemp. And this was really great. So we had Dwayne Philippi. He's the gentleman from Canada that I've been referring to. He's standing here with the longer hair. He was very familiar with this process, and along with RW Technologies, which is this Glenn Baird here, who's the CEO, I believe, of that company, we're really focused on taking the seed, because that is really the primary commodity that Canada has been working on perfecting in terms of their national industry. and creating seed oil from that, which is used in the food industry, nutraceutical industry, and also other ways you can use seed oil. There's been studies where you can, allow it to go rancid and turn it into motor oil or things like that as well. So not just for the body, but also for mechanics. This is the resulting product. Of course, it's a very dark green color. It is incredibly dense in nutrients and especially essential fatty acids. It's a very healthy oil, and the markets that have been really promoting things like flax are now saying, wow, hemp is the next best thing, maybe even a little better in terms of its overall nutrient profile, because it also has gamma-linolenic acid, which I think maybe flax does not have as much of a source of. Here were the challenges we realized from our first year. Number one, the DEA delayed import permit process by 5 months. So we knew what happened in Kentucky, but actually the agricultural commissioner was able to get the government to release the seed. And so we felt really confident that now that they had gone through that process, that we were going to be able to move on pretty easily. The Department of Agriculture, I believe, applied for their import permit in November of 2014, and it wasn't even processed until, the nick of time in terms of our farmers being able to plant during the optimum window for cultivating hemp. So it took a long time. As a result, contracts for seed and shipment were delayed until late May, early June, and resulted in a late planting. We faced plant issues. There were some notable bloom funguses, weeds, and pests. And this continues to be an issue because there are no approved pesticide or herbicides for the crop. We have a lack of clarification for processing and manufacturing. So, for example, the gentleman who was interested in processing hemp seed, RWO Technologies, one of the concerns they ended up having is, hey, we don't have the coverage of the agricultural pilot program because we are not licensed by the state. So I can only assume that's one of the reasons they chose not to get involved, because they weren't protected by the same thing that protects farmers from getting involved. We've since changed that. Market limitations. The question continues to be, can we transport material without violating interstate commerce laws? So we're surrounded by states that don't have hemp laws in place. They might think that our product is actually marijuana. They don't have a law that makes the distinction. Also, the DEA or Department of Justice could, potentially make a move on a state that was taking, first or secondary processed hemp, which might still be perceived as a viable plant for whatever reason, and, come in, arrest that farmer or whatever for, driving it over a border, a state border, into a, maybe a state that doesn't have a law yet but has a great processing facility. These are all hypotheticals. None of those things have happened. However, we continue to communicate that these are an issue. These things are an issue until they're not an issue when industrial hemp is recognized by the federal government as an actual agricultural commodity. And we're really urging the Industrial Hemp Farming Act to be passed, because that's exactly what it would do, is it would remove hemp from the Controlled Substance Act list, and it would allow us to be able to move more in a free market trade aspect when it comes to this as a commodity, because right now there are gray areas that business people, they look at this and from a risk mitigation standpoint, it looks a little too risky right now. There's a lack of private lab testing due to the DEA requiring lab permit. So what this means is if somebody were growing hemp for its cannabinoid profile and wanted to look at all the therapeutic cannabinoids that might be in this plant, and we're not talking about THC, we're talking about CBD or CBN, CBG, there's all these other cannabinoids that are present within the plant that do not provide the euphoria that we have been taught is associated with THC. But by virtue of testing the plant, you might end up testing and finding THC in the plant. It's not that it would be high, but the fact that you might find that THC or have a conversion of any amount of THCA to THC, I understand this may be really, it's very complex. But that could potentially put you in violation in their eyes. And the DEA thinks that anyone who's going to test cannabis should be getting a lab permit from them, from the Office of Diversion Control. And I don't know that there are any examples of the DEA going after anyone, but they do have that in place on their website, and so it does seem like if you did anything that you might be in violation. Here are the new, this is the new landscape of federal laws. In 2016, the same hemp amendments that we saw from the Appropriations Act, which defunded the DOJ and DEA, were re-entered and adopted. And then also, there was a new one added to the omnibus. So section 763 made it such that none of the funds made available by this act or any other act may be used in contravention of section 7606 of the Agricultural Act of 2014, the Farm Bill, or to prohibit the transportation, processing, sale, or use of industrial hemp that is grown or cultivated in accordance with subsection 7606 of the Agricultural Act of 2014, within or outside the state in which the industrial hemp is grown or cultivated. So, that whole conversation I just had with you about us not knowing, and at that time this had not passed, but us not knowing if we could go across state lines with our product, this basically helped resolve that issue, but almost idealistically, because whereas this went to law now, and this is law, so it does have precedent over some of the statements that are now being made. USDA, DEA recently made a statement and said that they had a clause that, said that transportation, transporting domestic hemp was kind of a no-no, and it was in a statement of principles they made. But this law, in this section, that's part of this year's omnibus, says transportation, processing, sale, or use of industrial hemp that is grown or cultivated in accordance with the Farm Bill, which is what we're doing. We should be able to, we should be able to do this, that the Department of Justice and the DEA cannot use any funds to prohibit us from trying to process, manufacture, distribute goods from our crop and our commodity. So kind of we're in a pull in terms of federal government getting its act together, because they have this law, but then you've got the administrations and agencies that are pushing back against it.
That the lobbyists and the people in the past did to try to keep you from using a product that doesn't hurt anybody. We're still fighting that same old fight because of lobbyists and people that want to knock out the competition.
Sure. I mean, I couldn't isolate for you what lobbyists or who they are, but there is just this general thought pattern that has perpetuated the idea that hemp is still illicit, and it's not, and we're proving that. And then we have all of these commodities that don't have anything to do with a drug, and we're still being told, at least from the government agency or administration standpoint, that we shouldn't be doing it. But it's perfectly fine for us to buy $500 million of it from other countries, Yeah. All right, so this is what we did this year in the state in terms of the law. So some of the challenges we had. Number one, processors and manufacturers didn't feel comfortable processing our hemp because they weren't licensed under an agricultural pilot program. So we fixed it. We passed a law That would require hemp processors to become licensed as a part of the hemp agricultural pilot program. Now, require sounds like it's not a good thing. The truth is, it is. You pay $250 and you are covered. You are now part of the agricultural pilot program. You are just as capable of handling, storing, and processing hemp as the farmer is, who is also licensed. And
Is that for 1 year or no?
it's annually.
Annual.
Yeah. And it takes a little step further. I was talking to you about certified hemp, certified cultivars or hemp from all these other countries. It's a real tedious process, I guess I'll just put it that way. You've got to find your seed producer in the other country. There may or may not be a language barrier. There may or may not be different types of paperwork that has to be produced. You may or may not have to sign on the dotted line that you will not replant any of the seed. I mean, there's so many complexities in terms of acquiring the certified seed varieties. And while they are stable, and we know that, and we are using these certified cultivars and doing variety trials here, there are domestic hemp, there is still domestic hemp in the United States. We haven't found any in Tennessee. I have seen some heirloom hemp in Kentucky that was untouched and has probably been growing for hundreds of years. The idea was to allow our institutions of higher education to be able to work with non-certified varieties to develop a domestic cultivar for the purpose of certifying it here so that it's domestic and that we're not going to Canada or going to France or going to Australia. These are some of the countries that we have been obtaining seed from to this point. So we're really hoping that we're able to get a domestic seed certified in the state. Certification program doesn't even have its protocol completely put together on how to certify hemp in the United States, but it's coming. I know that they're working on that and looking at that very seriously because of the amount of momentum hemp has now as a commodity. 31 states now have hemp laws. So this is happening. So here's a look at the 2016 season. 2015 we had 54. This year we had 63 approved applicants. And it was for just a little less than 1,200 acres is what the intended amount of land mass was to be. The result ended up being 63 licensed applicants, and we're there. I mean, 1,185 acres is what's underground. And because we have licenses for processors and manufacturers now, we do have 2 processors who have licenses, Extract.World and LabCanna.
Where are they located?
I do not know, actually, but the Department of Agriculture would have that information. And I would Google them because I think that Extract.World is actually headquartered in somewhere else in the United States. And it's sort of like a pop-up mission here in terms of being available. I can't say that with certainty, but I would just definitely check both of these resources out. I'm not sure that LabCanna has their infrastructure perfectly together yet, but I know their intention is there, and they're looking. I think they last meeting, and these are the people who actually come to TNHIA meetings. So if you want to come and network and meet them, they're usually there. Someone who's a representative is usually there. So that would be a great opportunity to have that face-to-face. So like we had the original projection from 2015, this is the original projection for May 2016. And so the map has changed a little bit. I tend to like this one a lot because it actually breaks down the county by color of how many acres are being cultivated there, and it's a little easier for you to see compared to the previous map. So we've got a few counties that are growing over 50 acres. Although more is not necessarily better. Because we are in a variety trial period, finding out what works for us and what doesn't, it is a good idea to start small, in my opinion. And this is just showing you, this uses these bubbles to pinpoint where these higher acreage farms are located. So, talked a little bit about cultivars and certified cultivars. This is what we're growing this year. These cultivars are from Canada, Italy. And I don't know if these came in. I got this information from the Department of Ag several weeks ago, maybe even a month ago. But I know there was also an intention to maybe acquire cultivars from Serbia and Poland.
Are those mainly oil crops or fiber crops?
They're both. Canada, I mean, most of them would all claim that they're probably dual purpose, but sure, they have a higher yield of one or the other. It seems to me that Fiber Nova and Futura 75 are fiber. And actually, when I look at the Italian varieties, I think that mostly Italian varieties lean on a higher yield for fiber. And the Canadian varieties, maybe they yield a little bit more towards seed and seed oil density, or, they have higher yield there. And it's really important before getting involved to look at the variety data sheets so that you've got an idea. You already have a product in mind in terms of, is it textile, is it seed oil, is it cannabinoids? Then you want to have some type of educated idea about what you're going to get. And so hemp variety data sheets, that's what you need to get your hands on. The European Commission has a plant variety data sheet. They've got a section dedicated to hemp. It's got about 55 cultivars, I think, on there. But to me, their data sheet is pretty incomplete and inconclusive. They'll give you the name, they'll give you the country of origin, they'll tell you who owns the intellectual or who owns the rights to that variety, but it doesn't do the best job of breaking down any of the pertinent information as to yields. And so you may have to continue hunting. But it does have the information for who owns it, so if you just contact the person who has the IP on that seed variety, then they should have a variety data sheet that they could share with you, because I'm sure they want you to buy their seed, and so they probably want you to know what potential it has. This is Bill Corbin's farm from earlier in the season. This is actually a really fun picture to share because we didn't talk a whole lot about agronomy in this plant, but it grows very quickly. You're looking at anywhere from 90 to 120 days, generally speaking, on full maturity from the time that you sow the seed. And so this is a week later. So as you can see, it's right below her knee, and now it's well above her waist.
When is that? Is that June or what?
Yeah, I believe this was in
July.
June. Yeah, this was probably in mid-June. So it grows fast. This is a look at Canada, which is actually, this is being grown separate from the hemp farm that has the hemp maize on it. The hemp maize is Futura 75. The whole hemp maize is that variety, but in front of that there's a row that was just kind of planted sparingly and was somewhat experimental, and there was Canada growing there. I think the Canada's still out there, but it doesn't look quite as nice and green and lush as it does here because it's past its window of you harvesting it at the right time, I believe. So if you go out there, you're not going to see it in this pretty form. It'll be probably brown and kind of dried up.
What's the season for it in Tennessee?
It depends on variety. So again, going back to variety data sheets and knowing when the optimum time to plant is, But in general, we say that it's from, I mean, I guess you could start as late April, depending on the variety, but, you know, I think optimum is probably sometime in the middle of May, and then taking it all the way through to the beginning of August, and then taking it then. I think that's very general terms, because every variety has its own way about it in terms of.
Pretty similar to the rest of the crops. You know.
Right.
Kind of like corn silage.
Pardon?
Kind of like corn silage.
Okay. Yeah, so hempmaize.org, this is an agritourism research project because, again, limitations on the market. What can we do with the crop? We're going to grow an acre of it, you know, we're doing a variety trial. Well, let's turn it into a maize. Let's open it up to the public. It has educational posters throughout the maze talking to you about what you can do with this crop in terms of, you know, offsetting CO2 in the atmosphere and creating a bio oils or biodiesel rather, doing all kinds of things with this crop that we actually talk about as a society needing to do to become more green, and we have this crop that can do a lot of it, probably almost all of it, and you know, we're still treating it like it's an illicit thing. So this hemp maze is really great in terms of education. And again, this is the very last weekend you can go and tour the hemp maze for yourself. And there will be vendors out there. There's going to be food trucks who are actually serving hemp-infused food items. And so it'll be a really cool experience this weekend. I'll be out there, and I hope to see you guys come. This is where it's at. So I think that you were right about Marshall County. That little leaf right there, that's where the hemp maze is. It's about an hour south of Nashville, and it's about 35, 40 from us. Go down 840, and then you get off of 840 and go like you're going towards Arrington Vineyard, but instead of turning down the road for Arrington Vineyard, just keep going straight, and it'll be on your left. I don't know how many miles down that way, but it's down there. So here are some of the challenges from this season. Plant issues, again, some bloom funguses, weeds and pests. Again, no approved pesticide or herbicides for this crop. Market limitations, can we transport material without violating interstate commerce laws? The only reason I keep this up here is because even though we have the statement that's in the omnibus, that section 763 about transporting and prohibiting DEA or DOJ from interfering with the transportation of the results of our pilot program in legal states, the USDA DEA just issued about 3 weeks ago their statement of principles that made a statement that was in conflict with that law. So here we are, you know, struggling to conceive exactly what the intent is. Are we going to be able to move our commodities or not? Lack of private lab testing due to DEA requiring lab permit. That pretty much still is a thing, although creatively, some scientists are finding pretty smart ways to get around that. Although they're a little dangerous. So we'll see what happens there. Proper harvesting and storage equipment. So we need equipment that is designed specifically for harvesting hemp. And in Canada, they have this equipment, you know, they refer to, I think it's a Draper style combine, and there's another style combine, identifying what's going to work for us in terms of the varieties we have. It hasn't been that easy, and I'm not sure that anything has actually been used. The harvesting that I've seen has been hand harvested, which is very antiquated in terms of us trying to do this on a commercial scale. For a small, farm, probably not a big deal, but if we're wanting to gain an advantage to start working at the level of the Canadian market, which will be a long time before we're there, I'm sure, but we need to start thinking on how do we get to the point of approaching cultivation and harvesting from a commercial standpoint. So why hemp? So we've gone through this whole thing of what we're doing, all the challenges we face, and you probably by now are like, wow, that's a lot. I'm over it. Because can be very intimidating to look at everything that we are facing right now just by trying to enter the industry. But the reason why is 2015 annual retail sales for hemp products estimated that we were at $573 million worth of hemp goods in the United States. And that's a pretty big market. I mean, it's not huge compared to a lot of others, perhaps, but it is something. And for the American farmers to be able to claim some of that would be fantastic for our country. It'd be fantastic for people who, are farmers by, that's their career and they need another crop. So that's one reason why. The other reason why is that, again, we're importing, and you have Canada now growing upwards, and this was 2014, but that was 50,000 hectares, so multiply that by 2, and they're growing more than 100,000, maybe 150,000 acres now at this point, and we are buying most of it.
Why is Alberta down at the low? I mean, what's the difference between Alberta and Canada? Isn't that a province?
Yeah, it's a province, and I think that this came from Alberta's government resource, and it was just the most comprehensive graph that I could find to show you Canada at large. But yeah, obviously Alberta isn't doing much in terms of the whole national. So every other province is growing as well, and all combined they're reaching that number. And they are exporting 59% of everything to us. And then also to other countries, so you're looking at the United Kingdom, Japan, Ireland, other, but this is why. So why hemp? Because Canada, they are.
So we're buying 59% of it, and we won't let our people grow.
Right,
That makes no sense.
that's right.
Well, we used to import eastern red cedar shingles into this country from Canada because they can't grow eastern red cedar in Tennessee. And the biggest user of those were the pencil companies down in Shelbyville. Now, if you drive outside of Murfreesboro, you'll find a lot of eastern red cedar. Now, the breakdown on that $573 million nationally, how much does that break down on a per state basis?
I don't know the answer to that question.
How much does it break down in Kentucky on a per state basis?
I don't know. But, we did have there was a buyer representative from Whole Foods Market National, which I think is out of Texas. They came to our Hemp Industries Association conference a couple of years ago, and they actually did a whole presentation about how hemp foods were the fastest trending food item in the natural food sector. And, reaching out to, and I mean, maybe they wouldn't share that information with you unless you pay for it. I don't know how that works. But it seems to me that maybe going to the companies who are marketing through retail these items and looking at per state who is buying would probably help provide a way for you to kind of look at what states are, how states are consuming hemp. But if you go to our Kroger here, you're going to find hemp seeds, you're going to find lots of different things that contain hemp. We'll get to that. For example, oh, sorry, these are so fuzzy, but I mean, this is Nature's Path. This isn't every food market here in Rutherford County or anywhere. And this has hemp seeds in the granola. And then also you can find hemp milk. I have seen this product on the shelves, and Kroger and Publix has they have a different kind of hemp seed. I guess the point to say is that it's here, and consumers are buying it, and we are not growing it to the scale that we can turn it into these commodities domestically. But so hemp seeds are being used for confectionery, items, beer, flour, feed, dietary fiber, it's being put in snacks, non-dairy milk and non-dairy cheese alternatives, and it's used in baking. And so, you know, this is hemp seed, raw hemp seed. It's probably dehulled. You can buy old hemp seeds or seeds with the hull. Sometimes they're seasoned. Actually, if you go to Sunshine Nutrition Market, you'll find a lot of varieties of hemp seed that are probably seasoned, Cajun seasoning, salt and pepper, whatever. And then hemp oil, which is the seed pressed, and then the fatty oil from the seed creating these other products. So you're looking at hemp oil products used for cooking, salad dressing, dietary supplements, body care products, fuel, detergents, flavored spreads, and it can also be used in paint. There's actually a company, and the name is slipping me right now, Hemp Shield, I think it is, but they make a deck varnish basically out of hemp oil. And these are all real products. In fact, this is actually a BMW i8 in the interior textiles, the fabric, and some of the biocomposites, I think, that make the paneling. They're made out of hemp. And so, you know, in terms of scale, I mean, you're looking at high value products that are using hemp. I mean, they're not just doing it for giggles. There's a reason. It's a great product for them to use because of its integrity. So the fiber, you know, general fabric, insulation, carpeting, paneling, pulp and paper, recycling additive, automobile parts, animal bedding, and mulch.
Are you looking at it to replace cotton?
I think they do different things better than the other, realistically. I mean, you know, cotton makes a lot of hygiene products that we use, toilet paper, female feminine products. Hemp would probably not be great for that.
Clothes.
Yeah. Well, you know, in terms of clothing, I think that that'll be up to the market and the consumer, but we know that hemp fibers, they are naturally UV protected, and they're actually antimicrobial, which some hospitals, I think in other countries, have been using hemp for hospital bedding for that very reason. So there are definitely reasons why we should use hemp, probably, to have, you know.
Do you have any information on the amount of profit a grower could receive from producing hemp for either oil or fiber?
There is data out there.
But you don't have it.
It's not that I don't have it. I'm not going to share it with you because it is so incredibly unstable to really make that statement at this point in the United States growing hemp. And people may not like that I just said that, but that's the truth.
But that's all commodities. I mean,
Yeah.
you open up your newspaper and you see what corn, soybean, etc. are selling for. So there's nothing.
See, that's what a grower's gonna wanna know.
Oh yeah, absolutely, right? But we're just not there, and that's the thing. We don't even have a buyer hardly. There are some people who are buying now, and they're going to buy. You know, I think most of the people who are coming to the table are buying for the leaf and flower material so that they can, you know, extract the cannabinoids from it and create tinctures and things like that. And there is a very incredible thing happening in the health market right now in terms of it as a supplement. You know, all these different cannabinoids and terpenes and how beneficial they are for us because we have an endocannabinoid system. But that market it's not really the traditional aspect of what industrial hemp had been cultivated for. As you can see, we're looking at seed oil, and textiles, and what I just mentioned is something different. So the data is out there, and Canada is probably the best country to look at, see what they're doing. But again, they're highly adapted now in terms of an industry and have a good foundation of hemp as an industry. And